Well, hello, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to Digital Marketing Masters Class. I am Todd Smith, VP of Partner Growth here at Farotech. I'm joined by Chris Carr. He is the CEO of Farotech. Hello, Chris.
Hey, how we doing?
Good. I'm excited for today's episode, largely because I think there's a lot of confusion about this subject. So today we're going to talk about content-based SEO. So what I'd like you to do is just unpack it on the macro level. So just start by defining it. What is content-based SEO?
Yep. Well, I think the way to define it is kind of say what it's not. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times people will just say SEO. And what I kind of do when I talk to people that are kind of my peers and stuff like that, we talk about the approach, it actually gets broken down into a variety of different factors. I think the hardest one of all of them is obviously backlinking. A lot of companies concentrate a lot on making sure your website's airtight. We have software to kind of figure out how the Google spiders are working. And so we do a lot of best practices with that. But I think when you start to look at, all of it working in tandem, which is something we absolutely do in Farotech, I think what makes SEO sort of innovative is the idea to help our clients become thought leaders. And when they're thought leaders, they're going to develop authority. When they develop authority, the website should grow if you commit to content. Okay. And so what we call about content-based SEO, it's the same thing you would kind of call content marketing, but I know a lot of content marketing companies out there that pump out really great content, really innovating, very, very engaging. But the only way it would rank on the first page of Google is if they got backlinks, because I look at their page and I look at how they optimize the page and stuff. And I'm like, man, it needs a lot of work.
Okay. All right. So I think you were going in this direction, but how is content-based SEO different from just standard SEO?
Yep. So when I'm trying to focus on content, there's certain things that I'm going to look to do. I'm going to look to develop an editorial calendar. And when I go and I develop an editorial calendar, what that's going to do is, we just talked in our last blog about kind of the Jim Collins flywheel. Mm-hmm. But what our editorial calendar allows us to do is it allows you to go from being a reactive SEO, marketing company to a proactive marketing company, in particularly the form of SEO and content. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write content, and I'm going to write content in a way that is structured, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit. Okay. But everything fits into a larger plan of content. What it is, what keyword we're optimizing for, when it's going to launch. I'm going to take in seasonality. I'm going to take in, are there other factors that impact the business and when, because I have to develop the calendar to know when certain things have to be on the first page of Google. Then I have to look at the keyword difficulty to figure out if I choose this keyword, will I be able to rank in time? How often am I going to re-optimize and things like that? And so, how is it different from normal SEO? Mm-hmm. A lot of normal SEO is, it's a Larry Cookbook type stuff. It's like, you got to make sure all your H1s are good. You got to make sure your title tags are good. You got to do all that stuff, which I kind of call table stakes. But with content, what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to marry that content with all that technical stuff.
Okay. That makes sense. So let me ask another question. This is going to piggyback on the first one or the second question, but why is content so important? Like, I love all that H1, all that formatting stuff, but why, what sets content apart and why is it so important to SEO?
Yeah. Well, I think what you got to understand is, how does Google work? What is Google value? And a lot of times people will say, Google hates SEO companies. Well, I'm sure they don't love them, because I'm sure that we take a couple pennies off the table. But the reality is that Google is way, way, way more afraid of losing market share to Bing than they are about the pennies that SEO companies take from them. So what they try to do is they try to say, hey, you know what? We want you to rank organically, because the better results we have in organic, the more people come to Google versus Bing, and then it's a better chance you're going to create ads. Okay. So what they do is that when they created Google, they said, you know what? People that are thought leaders are going to communicate in these formats. And it's pretty funny, because I read the book on Google. It's called The Google Story. So much of how Google ranks is literally comes down to the same way college term papers were good, right? You wrote a really great, compelling piece of content, but then you also had You're laughing. I guess you didn't write very good content in
No,
college.
I'm laughing because I'm writing one right now, and I'm just like thinking. All I thought about was like the professor throwing it down the stairs, and where it lands, you get graded. That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where I thought you were going with that one.
Well, the way they were describing it in Google is like you write really compelling content. There's levels of readability. There's content length. There's a whole bunch of factors. But one of the main things that they have is when you write a college term paper, if you're going to quote somebody, you have to cite them at the bottom. You can't just plagiarize their stuff. Backlinks are the same thing as like citing an author.
Okay.
The thing is, though, is that if you get cited enough from other websites, you know what I mean?
Trust factor.
Google says that person's trustworthy. He's an authority. So when I write content, I'm trying to write content so compelling that I'm going to get cited in other people's work.
Okay.
That means you got to bring a lot of value. You got to bring a lot of data. You got to cut through the BS.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of stuff with that, but there's also a technical side. So let me kind of walk you through that. I'm going to share my screen real quick.
Okay, sure.
So with that, what you're looking at here is called structured content. So in the beginning of SEO, you could just write one really large page of content on your website, get a bunch of backlinks or something like that. The way Google favors it now is to basically create families of content that thought leaders aren't just one-hit wonders. They consistently communicate. They're very authoritative. And they realize that if a subject matter is worthy enough, essentially what's going to happen is, you know what, content is going to be supporting other pieces of content. And so we use a model, we call it a hub and spoke model. You know, HubSpot calls it pillar pages. I think Brian Dean calls it pillar pages as well. But what we're talking about is the idea or the concept of writing one really, really great piece of content, 1,500, 2,000 words minimum. We're going to make it chock full of data and stuff like that. But what we're also going to do is know that when I wrote that page, that the keywords on that page also have other ancillary keywords that also help flesh out that story. So we're going to create other pages on the website that point back to that page. And so we say it's a hub and spoke. It's like the hub's in the middle. And then I might have blogs. I might have infographics. I might have videos. All of that. It's like kind of like all roads lead to Rome.
Mm-hmm.
So when you develop an editorial calendar, if you don't know how to structure your content, it's not only writing great content, it's how you structure it. There's some science in that.
Okay.
We inherit websites from clients that had a previous vendor, and we got to go back and we got to do surgery to get the pages in alignment, because in a very weird way, Google's a supercomputer, but they reward the people that don't make them think.
Gotcha. That makes sense. All right. So here's my next question. This could be difficult. Is what do we do to make sure that the content is SEO optimized? Like, what's that process look like?
Yep. You're going to have that editorial calendar, and the editorial calendar is going to know what content goes out in the next 30, 60, or 90 days.
Okay.
What we're also going to do is, you know what I mean? Like, everything's tied together. But what we're going to do is that content goes to a document like this.
Okay.
And this document here is going to be optimized, you know, for a certain keyword. And then from there, what's going to happen is that we're going to run it through our software tools, and our software tools are going to be able to say, hey, you know what? We're going to compare this with all the content on the first page of Google. And based upon what we're seeing here, you have a very poor chance of ranking. Your readability isn't nearly what your competitors have. The number of words you have on a page doesn't even come close to outcompeting your competition. And out of the critical keywords that have to exist on that page, you're missing the top 2 and possibly the majority of the top 20. So what's going to happen here is that when we go and we write content, we're going to be able to know all those things prior to publishing. So our need to re-optimize is far less than companies that are just kind of like publishing and praying.
Gotcha. That makes sense. All right. So I'm going to ask a loaded question here. So don't be mad at me.
Yep.
All right. So once you go through this whole process, right, you write the content, you get it through the grader, you figure out what's going on, right? You get it right where you think it's in the sweet spot. Is it guaranteed to rank?
No, it's not guaranteed.
Come on. I knew
exactly.
Come on.
So what we tell our clients is
people want a guarantee, Chris.
I know they do. They do. Back in the day, I used to write a guarantee on my website.
Did you really?
Oh yeah. But I mean, it was one of those days where backlinking algorithm changes hadn't happened, and you could just,
Right.
I don't know. You could do tactics to kind of like really push yourself ahead. Those days are over. But how do you guarantee it? Well, there's no guarantee, but what I do say is that every third month of what we do is we go and we re-optimize. And so what I mean by that is we're going to write content, and, you know, I hate the spaghetti model, but it's kind of like that. It's like saying, we're going to find out where it sticks, where it ranks. If it lands on page 2, we might have to go in there and add more meat to the content. And what's going to happen is over time, that content's going to rank. I mean, in our previous blog, you know, long tail keywords, you know, they can take almost 90 to 121 days to rank. You know, medium levels, like half a year, maybe even longer. And then the really competitive words can take over almost a year.
Wow.
So what you got to do is you got to have the data to monitor that. Mm-hmm. And you got to figure out, is it growing? Is it consistently growing? Is it on an upward trend? And if it's not, you're going to go in and re-optimize it to add more meat, because, you know, Google's a finicky thing and none of us own it. But if a good SEO company kind of sees what trajectory are you on and what can you do to just keep, you know, like sharpening the spear to make sure that it goes, you know, it just keeps getting better and better over time, and it outcompetes your competition.
Gotcha. I have one closing question for you, and I just kind of thought of it as you're speaking. How difficult is it to write good content?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that's going to be important for any company to do is to make sure that the subject matter expert in your company, if you're using an SEO vendor or you're trying to do it in-house, that the SME feels like his content is coming, like the content on the page feels like it's coming right out of their brain. Okay. And so what we strive to do is every time we write content for our clients, we will literally interview the client based upon that piece of content, because I think it's the nuances that make it great. Okay. Other things you want to do is you want to put a lot of data in there. You want to make sure that it's compelling. You want to tell stories. You know, you want to create lists that are easily digestible. You want to put rich media in there, like video and things like that. So, you know, it's not all about writing. A lot of it is about making sure all the ingredients of the compelling story are there.
That makes sense. Okay. Well, listen, I appreciate your time. Anything else you want to add on the topic of content-based SEO?
Don't try it at home. What I mean by that is there's so much content out there. It's like you're like a needle on a stack of needles. Yeah. So if you don't have a subject matter expert that can eliminate the noise and beat the competition, you know what? It's content. It can take 2 to 3 hours to write a decent piece of content. Okay. You know what? It would stink if you wrote something that was as good as Shakespeare and it was on page 2. Yeah. It'll never be found. I got you. Cool. All right. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us out there. Just want to encourage you to subscribe. Please, we're pushing this content. Speaking of content, we're pushing this type of information out all the time. So hit subscribe and we will catch up with you on the next one. All right.